when Ivan proposes to ANORA, he makes decisions very fast, and she's skeptical at first, and she's like, "Are you serious about it?" And I was wondering, because it's a big decision, and I was wondering when it comes down to your life or career as an artist, how much time do you usually need until you are like, you know what, this might actually be the right thing to do right now?
In terms of like choosing a character or film I want to do?
Or like just in general, a big decision. But yeah, I guess taking a role is a big decision because you're going to spend much time with it then.
I mean, I think in terms of like choosing a character, it's usually something I know right away. If I feel that I have to do it, it's usually a sign. I think if something takes convincing, it's probably not a good idea to do.
Yeah.
But in terms of other decisions, I don't know. I think I'm generally quite risk averse, and so.
Oh yeah.
But I will say that a couple months ago, I made a very rash decision getting a puppy. I walked into an adoption event, and I saw this little puppy, and in less than like 30 seconds, I decided to bring it home. And so that was probably the quickest decision I've ever made in my life, yeah.
So sweet. I actually have also 2 puppies, like
really?
a Dachshund, yes, and a Yorkshire. Yeah.
So cute.
They enrich life.
They do, really. But also having a puppy is really difficult.
You're absolutely right. I hear you. And what about, because when ANORA talks about like the honeymoon already with her colleagues, she's like, well, maybe we're going to spend it at Disneyland because it's like her childhood dream. And I was wondering if you remember like a childhood dream that so far you still haven't turned into a reality but still want to.
That's a good question. I don't know. Well, when I was younger, I had dreams of like wanting to be a competitive horseback rider, or a professional horseback rider. I already did competitive, but then I kind of went and chose a different path in terms of my career. So I don't know, that's such a good question. I've always been really passionate about animals, and I've always wanted to have like a ranch with horses, so hopefully maybe one day I'll be able to have that.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Thanks. Thank you.
And so I would like to describe like the relationship like it's almost like a fairy tale. And I was wondering, because in this business that we are working in, things are very uncertain because you have a job, and then like once you completed the film, it starts all over again, right? The search for the next thing. And I was wondering if you ever had a moment where you were like, wow, this is actually too good to be true.
I've had a couple moments where it felt too good to be true. Like when my first sort of big film role, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I was actually supposed to play a different character originally, which is a different story. But
yeah.
I remember walking into the table read and feeling like constantly like pinching myself, like, is this actually happening? It felt very dreamlike, and I definitely had some thoughts of like if it was real or not. But I don't know. Other than that, I feel like it's been pretty based in reality. Like, there's been years where I haven't worked and things like that. So I think it's balanced. It's been balanced out quite well. Yeah.
And what about, because there's a line in the film from a colleague from ANORA, and no, she's actually jealous of ANORA because she gets out there, and your character goes like, "Oh, jealousy is a disease." And I was wondering, because especially in this business, I feel like that jealousy is like a common thing, when certain people achieve something and stuff. And you have become a successful actor. And I was wondering, what is your relationship with jealousy within this movie world?
That's a good question. I think in terms of that specific scene, I think that was actually an improvised line, if I remember correctly. But
yeah,
Annie is trying to she's kind of like digging the knife in a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's enjoyable for her in sort of a sadistic way, but I think that she feels like she's earned that satisfaction, and she has no problem twisting the knife a little bit.
Until it bleeds, right?
Yeah, and then it gets obviously thrown back in her face in a way that's really painful. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but my relationship to jealousy, I think once I understood the difference between envy and jealousy, I was able to continue on in a different way, because I would often feel jealous of certain things, or wish I had other opportunities, or
Yeah.
came from a certain background. But once I realized that that's such a natural human reaction, it made me feel like less of a bad person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that being jealous is one thing, but it's how you react and treat people that's really the most important. I
Absolutely,
could be
yeah.
like, jealous that someone got a role that I had really wanted, but it's more important for me to reach out and congratulate them as opposed to acting on any of the internal feelings I have. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
So true. And what about, because Ivan is also a very interesting character, and it feels like that he doesn't really have a concept of life. He lives like in the moment, and he makes decisions like that, and it's like party, and it feels like he's kind of stuck in a time loop until ANORA comes in. And I was wondering, what would you say is like your concept of life?
Well, I think Yvonne is kind of like an eternal child. He's
Yeah.
always going to be that like party guy that never grows up. And I've definitely met those people before. But I think when you're brought up in a certain way and you have this like infinite safety net underneath you, it's difficult to move past that.
Yes.
At least from what I've been able to see, not from personal experience. But wait, what was the second part of your question? It was how I feel about...
Like what your concept of life is, because he's like, he's not really a future thinker. Like he's really in the moment, and it feels like that he keeps the future like, like we'll see what happens, basically.
Right. Yeah, well, I think Annie is someone who she is thinking about the future. She's thinking about her life. She's hustling
Yeah.
to create a better life for her future self, because there's really only so long that you can continue on that kind of job.
Right, yeah.
Making the kind of money that she's making. But I think for me, I often have spent time like living in the past, and so it was important for me recently to try to be more present in my life and think forward as opposed to backwards, because I think that there's really I think it's important to learn from things that have happened in your life, but I don't think that you can be stuck in thinking about it. You have to keep going forward,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, would you say, because it also feels like the divan is like I don't know, maybe sometimes looking for a purpose in his life, what his purpose is. I was wondering, when it comes down to you and your art, when did you like develop the like the question, what is my purpose? What is it that I want to do?
Well, for a long time, I've been really passionate about acting. It's been something, and film in general, and recently I've found that my biggest passion has been acting in conjunction with filmmaking, and so I love all aspects of filmmaking, and I feel like for me, it's just where I feel like drawn to at the moment. But in terms of like a grander scheme of things, I don't know like what my purpose is. I think I'll probably always be searching for that. I don't know. Do you know what your purpose is?
I think that's really an ongoing thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like really.
Does anybody know? Do you think?
Yeah, and it's really hard. I feel like it also changes with life, right? I feel like
Yeah.
maybe after 30, after 40, it's always gonna it will never be the same, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about the sort of American mentality of like constantly hustling, like always having to be successful and do big things and like be better than the next person. And I personally really enjoy like a slower way of living too. And it's never necessarily been my mentality to be like constantly grinding. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I've recently just been liking just like a slower way of life, and I'm definitely more of a homebody as well. Yeah.